All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the Parsha class. Parshiot Tzaria and Metzora 5783. These Parshiot are very often read together. And that is the case this year. I think next year is a leap year, so should be that they're separated. We'll see. Either way, they are obviously very, very much related. Tzaria deals with the laws of somebody who has this illness called tzaraat, whether it's, as we've said in previous years, whether it's a natural occurrence related to psoriasis and skin diseases and leprosy and things like that, or whether it's a totally different spiritual illness that has to do with a very, very clearly miraculous punishment for certain behaviors. The Gemara in Arachim mentions that we've spoken about as well in previous years. Lashon Hara probably being the most famous, but greed and selfishness and other things like that are also included as reasons for this illness. And it can affect the skin, it can affect the hair, it can affect bald spots. And later on, we find out also in Metzora, we find out that it could also affect the house and clothing, and therefore there's a whole process in which, as the second parsha, as Metzora explains, a whole process of teshuvah that needs to go on once a person realizes that they have this illness. In Parshat Tazria, I should have mentioned before, there's a whole process in which the person is kept in quarantine, and the Kohen has to check out to see if this person has the illness and whether it's going away, whether it's getting worse, what color it is, how deep it is, different levels of white, etc. All of that is part of the process of finding out you have tzaraat. Once you know for sure that you do, then there's a process, as I was saying before in Metzora, of how to get rid of that illness, of how to get rid of that the impurity that the person has. While we're on the subject of impurity, the end of Parsha Metzora also talks about other kinds of impurity, the impurity of something called zav or zava, usually translated as gonorrhea. There's a certain impurity that also occurs when a person has when a woman has a regular menstrual cycle, and we've discussed in previous years why there's any tumor involved in that at all. That's a beautiful, normal, natural thing that allows a woman to have children. It seems very strange that there's any kind of tumor or impurity involved in that at all. And what is usually explained is, as we've said again in previous years, we've talked about how that is the process of life has to include death. It's a sad sort of thought, and the death is the real source of most tumaot, of most impurities, and therefore a person who was born is destined, after 120 years, God willing, is destined to die. Right, so it's a given. One of the two givens that Benjamin Franklin spoke about. The other one was earlier this week. So the death occurs to all of us, and so therefore we mark that event, that the menstrual cycle, we mark with some sort of with a recognition of the fact that it will lead to death. We've spoken about that in previous years. I don't think we'll deal too much with that today. What I'd like to talk about today, though, is something very much the opposite. Let's get into the sources and do a deep dive into the Parshiot right there. All right, Baruch Hashem. Okay, we're going to start at the very beginning. The Parsha Tazria is called Tazria for a reason. Tazria means to give off, like to give off in this case, to give out a child. So we're told Hashem speaks to Moshe and says, the Ber El Bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, Lemor, and say to them, Isha ki Tazria v'yalda, a woman who has a child, Zachar, he's male, V'tama shivat yamim, he shall be impure for 7 days. Kimei nidat devota titma, she'll be impure for those 7 days. Why 7 days? So that's an interesting question. And the answer that's given, we're going to look at the Torah Tamima. So the next verse says, "Bayom hashmini yimo basar alato," and on the 8th day, they will give a circumcision to the boy that she gave birth to. Right? If she gave birth to a male, a zachar, so and on the 8th day is going to be the brit milah. Now, why is the brit milah on the 8th day? Why is she impure for 7 days? What's the 7 and 8 business? So we've spoken, I think, in previous years about sort of a spiritual answer for this, but now the Torah Tamima quotes a Gemara, and this is going to open up for us a discussion that's very important, very relevant to all of us. A question that is asked very often. If you haven't asked this question before, maybe you ought to. It's a very good question. Rabbis get this question very often, and it's as you'll see, very profound, the answer he gives. So he starts off by quoting the Talmud. The Talmud in Nida 31b, right? Nida all the way at the end of Shas, right? Says, Sha'alu hatalmidim et Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was a teacher, and he had students, and his students asked him lots of interesting questions, by the way, but here's one of them. Mipnei ma amra Torah mila l'shmona. Why is the Torah telling us that we have to give a brit milah on the 8th day? What's with the 8th day? Amar lahem, he said to them, Kidei shelo yeh kulam smechim v'avivimo atzavim. So it shouldn't be that everybody else is having a party at the Brit Milah, and the mother and father are almost like in mourning. Why would they be in mourning? So Rashi explains, Pirush Rashi, still the Torah Tamima, still quoting him. Kulam she'ochlim v'shotim b'suda. Everybody's eating and drinking at the meal. You're supposed to have a meal at Brit Milah. It's a requirement. V'avivimo atzavim she'asurim be. They're also to each other. So the father and mother, because if she is indeed impure, then they're not allowed to touch, not allowed to comfort each other physically, no hugging, no kissing, nothing. Everybody else is having a good time, and they have to be more or less separated. Right? And therefore, that's why the Torah says, and that's why the Torah says that that the Brit Milah is on the 8th day, because she's tameh, she's impure on the 7th day, and so on the 8th day now she's going to be available to receive the comfort of her husband. Beautiful answer. Right? Any blood she sees after that is pure. Now this is on the Torah's level. On the Torah's level, a woman after she gives birth is only impure for a week. We know, and this is going to become a relevant part of the discussion, we know that women took upon themselves a stronger, we call it now a rabbinical standard. It's really not really rabbinic. It started from the women. But the women, our holy mothers and foremothers, took upon themselves to not just be impure for a week, but to be impure for as long as there's still a flow of blood. And to treat themselves as if they are a nida, as if they are menstruant, as we're going to talk about at the end of the very, very end of Metzora. They consider themselves as if they are menstruating, as if they are in the status of nida, until the blood flow stops, and then they have 7 clean days of no blood at all. And then they are no longer nida, now then they can have physical contact with their husbands. Oh, wait a minute. If that's the case, then that kind of mivatels, that pushes out this whole rule of having the Brit Milah on the 8th day. So maybe we should have the Brit Milah a week after she's done. A week after the week when she's done being a nida, that clean week. After that, great. Start with the Brit Milah then. So Kvar noda ma shelamed hagra. This is a very well-known thing that the Vilna Gaon taught. This is a Torah Tamim is still speaking. Mekan the kol from here. He learns this lesson from here. It's an important lesson, as you're about to see. The kol takana shetakana b'shvil eze siba kayemet afal pi shabat lahasiba. Any kind of rule, rabbinic rule, that was accepted for a particular siba, a particular reason, and then that reason goes away for whatever reason, right? That intent goes away, the rule stays. The most famous example, probably when it comes to like Shabbat, is the rule of not taking medicine on Shabbat. You're not supposed to take medicine on Shabbat unless you need to, unless it strongly affects your Shabbat or will negatively impact your health. But in general, if you have like a mild headache, a mild toothache, or whatever, and it's you can still function properly just with a little discomfort, then you're not supposed to take your ibuprofen or your Tylenol at that point. Why? Because back in the time of the rabbis, when they established this rule, medicine wasn't bought in a drugstore. Medicine was made by people on the spot. They would take their pestle and mortar and they would make the medicine. Well, we don't do that anymore. So maybe we don't need to keep that rule anymore. Says the Vilna Gaon, once a takana was made for a particular reason, once that reason goes away, the takana stays. That rule stays. That he learns that from this. Because otherwise, everybody's brit mila would be on a different day, it wouldn't be on the 8th day anymore. Nowadays that we're more strict with this purity of the blood, as we treat it, like I said, as dam nida, as the blood of a nida, of a menstruant. Imkain batla hasiba memela b'shmini. So we really push away this whole reason for having a brit milah on the 8th day. And nevertheless, that rule stayed. We still have the brit milah on the 8th day. So that was the Torah Tamima quoting the Vilna Gaon. Now it says the Torah Tamima on his own. Now, by the way, it's worth noting that the Torah Tamima was written not by really a rabbi. I mean, he was a huge Talmud Chacham, but he didn't have technically smicha. He didn't have a shul. He wasn't part of a yeshiva. He was actually a businessman. And in his free time, he was the son of big Rosh Yeshiva, by the way, Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, the Netziv. But he wrote on his own. He wrote this book of Torah Tamima, which basically justifies rabbinic enactments from their sources in the Torah. This was a way that he fought against what would become the early 20th century reform movement. All right. Anyway, so he says here, right? So from here we can also explain an interesting midrash. The midrash says, I skipped a line. Ramesh Beloshet HaTanchuma, Reish Parshat Tetzaveh. In the very beginning of Parshat Tetzaveh, there's a midrash Tanchuma, and so it says, Lamdenu Rabbeinu Lakama Tino Knimo Lishmona. The rabbis learned that the boy should have a brit milah on the 8th day. Kishem Shinimo Yitzchak Avinu, just like Yitzchak Avinu had his brit on the 8th day. Why do we need those last 4 words? Kishem Shinimo Yitzchak Avinu, just like Yitzchak Avinu had a brit milah on the 8th day. So he explains, V'lo nidbar inyan shal l'tshuva. This has nothing to do with the actual question. Ki halo mitzvat mila l'shmona hi mitzvah yidua. The Torah gives explicit instructions that you're supposed to give a brit milah on the 8th day. So why is the Tanchum even asking this question? What does it have to do with anything? What does the time of the brit milah of Yitzchak have anything to do with it? What is this trying to teach us? Yesh loma de bekevan de petanchuma shol lekama tinuk nimo bezman hazeh. Nowadays, when do we have the brit milah for a boy? On the 8th day. Why? Doesn't fit with the reason for the 8th day being that she's impure for the first 7. Doesn't fit anymore because she's now impure for much longer. Acharei data batla hasiba shayu aviv imo nitarim. So that they're able to comfort each other and etc. and to touch. Nowadays it's aser after even on the 8th day. Same thing was going on with Yitzchak, because the whole reason for this enactment had to do with Tumah and Tahara, which wasn't established yet in the time of the Brit Milah of Yitzchak. Yitzchak's Brit Milah had nothing to do with Sarah being pure or impure or anything else. It was on the 8th day because it was on the 8th day. Even though that could change. That could change when she's pure, when she's impure, as it has changed, as the rabbis and as our holy mothers have changed it, and now she's impure for a longer time. Still, the Brit Milah doesn't change. It's still on the 8th day, just like Yitzchak's Brit Milah was on the 8th day. So too here, in our time. Vida, and he quotes now the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. Over there, where he gives another reason for the Brit Milah being on the 8th day. Another reason is because, and I think we've said this in previous classes, the Orach Chaim talks about this in some detail. Is that the 8th day was at least then established as a scientific proof that that's the time when blood coagulates better and the healing process can work better than if it was earlier than 8 days. But that only explains why that would be after 8 days. So you could have the Brit Milah 5 years later. The child would be better off than if he was younger than 8 days. So that's anyway, that's a whole other discussion. Maybe we'll get back to that at a later date. Meanwhile, let's get to some other important ideas in our parsha. Sorry. Okay, our next question that we're going to ask is, this mother who just had this baby is supposed to bring all kinds of karbanot, all kinds of sacrifices, etc. And in previous years, we kind of skipped over it. We didn't really talk about why that's the case. So maybe we'll get an opportunity now to look at some of the verses. So it says here, Umilot Yimei Tahara, and when she becomes pure, in other words, when she stops, when the bleeding ends, Leven or Levat, whether it's a boy, whether the woman gave birth to a boy or a girl, Tavi Keves Ben Shanato Leolah Ben Yona Otor Lechatat Petach Ol Moed El Kohen. She's supposed to bring a keves, a sheep, a lamb in its first year, and she's supposed to bring a pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. Right, so the kevis is a burnt offering. The bird is supposed to be a sin offering, and she's supposed to bring it to the Kohen. And then she brings this to the Kohen, and that's the rule for whether it's a boy or a girl. They said if she's unable to get these, she just bring 2 birds, either 2 pigeons or 2 bnei yona or 2 doves. One is going to be for this burnt offering, and the other one is going to be for the sin offering. And the Kohen will make her pure, and she will be pure. Wow. What is she getting purified from? She just had a baby. This is a good thing. Birth is wonderful, beautiful, amazing, miraculous. Why are we treating her almost like a sinner? So Rashi says, on the verse, echad le'ola ve'echad lechatas, one for a burnt offering, one for a sin offering. So he says, lo ikdimu hakatuv ela limikra. So the order here is sort of reversed. It's only telling us, it's not telling us the actual chronology of how that's happened. Aval lekarva chatat kodem le'ola. First, you bring the sin offering, and then you bring the burnt offering. And so he quotes the Gemara in Zvachim 90a. You want to look it up. All right, so that's Rashi. Explains Rav Hirsch, or Samson Rafal Hirsch, on his commentary on on chapter 12, verse 8. It's going to be hard to read. I apologize, especially on my screen. You don't see it, but my screen needs help. In the case of a mother who is poor, her ola too is an oaf, is a bird. That is to say, it is an oaf. As an oaf, she approaches God, unrelated to the bodily weakness she experienced. The oaf represents her powerless condition. It's a bird. It's a weak animal. It's easy to catch. They don't fight very hard, etc. Her lack of means, reflecting her general lot. Now, remember, she should have brought. For the burnt offering, she should have brought a lamb. But if she can't afford it, she can bring, indeed, she should bring a bird. All right? Moment. Okay? As an oaf, she draws near to God into a sanctuary and undertakes that despite the many hardships of her situation, which are symbolized in the offering procedure of Olat Oaf, she will not allow herself to be deprived of her self-respect and self-esteem. Even in her impoverished condition, she will adhere to the heights of her godly calling as a Jewish woman and mother. I just think this is just so beautifully said. Whatever the ceremony is, whatever she brings, all has importance and all has symbolism. And the symbolism that we want to focus on right now is the fact that we want her to have an ola, right? A burnt up offering implies a growth, an elevation towards the godly. And that's what we want her to have. We want her to remember and realize that she's a holy person and that she now has the important task ahead of her of being a mother, of being the person in a child's life who teaches the child how to be a great person and to grow and to be spiritual. And that needs to be focused on. That's one of the reasons for this whole ceremony. But aside from all that, if she's too poor to bring a lamb, it might depress her. She might think, oh, I'm not worth anything. I can't even bring a lamb for this offering. So we're like, what should I do? The Torah says, bring an oaf, bring a bird, right? And why? Because the bird is also symbolic of your situation. And at the same time, even though she's poor and can't afford a lamb, we don't want her to lose her self-esteem, especially now. This is a time for her to gain her self-esteem, to bring up her self-esteem, to realize her importance. If she doesn't do that, what does she have left? Right? All she's going to be is going to, all I have is a little bird. No, that bird is going up. There's an ola. It's being burnt up. Just like your direction in life is going up as well. Okay, we're going to now skip to about halfway through the class, perfect timing, to skip to the next parsha that we're studying today, and that's Parshat Metzora. Now, Metzora, the word itself, does not mean somebody with tzaraat. That's called a tzarua, right? A Metzora, from the word tzara is in it, but also the first letter, the mem, means from. This person is leaving that state. A Metzora is somebody who was a tzarua, is now becoming a not tzarua. So that's an important distinction. A lot of people make that mistake. A lot of people, very, very common error is that people think somebody with tzaraat is called a Metzora. Not correct. A Metzora is somebody who's leaving the status of having tzaraat. Okay. the process for becoming a Metzora, somebody who's leaving the status of being tzaraat, is complicated. First of all, there's a whole like waiting period, a quarantine period that we spoke about during the introduction. But aside from all that, then there's all kinds of sacrifices that need to be brought, and sprinklings of blood and sprinklings of oil, etc. So right now we're just going to focus on one small area of this whole process, and it's actually this part of the sacrifice is actually similar, irregardless of whether the person is rich or poor. We'll see that in the next few parsha, the same parsha, also in Metzora, verses 26 to 29 of the same chapter, 14, 26 through 29, talks about the same process being applied to a poor person who was a tzarua, somebody who had tzaraat. And it says here that they bring a bunch of stuff, as you'll see. Kohen miloga shemen v'yetzak al kaf kohen hasmalit. So this Kohen takes from a certain amount of oil, and he puts it into the palm, into the hand of the Kohen, of another Kohen's left hand, right? Or even his own left hand. All right, but Taval Kohen at Hayimanit, and then that Kohen, whoever it is, takes his right finger, index finger, and dips it into his left mina shemen, and dips it into his left hand, takes some of the oil. Asher al kapo hasmalit v'yiza min hashemen be'etzbo sheva pamim lifnei Hashem, and he's supposed to sprinkle that oil towards the mizbeach, towards the altar 7 times. That's part of the process. Then it says, Umiyeter Hashem and Asher al kapo yitin hakohen al tanuch ozen hamitaher hayimanit al bohen yado hayimanit val bohen rago hayimanit al dam ha'asham. And then because he also put already the blood from the previous sacrifice that we sort of skipped over, he already put that blood on the right cartilage of the tzarua's ear, and the right thumb, and the right big toe. Right, so that's now, he puts now oil on those same 3 spots. What is the symbolism? What is going on here? What is it? The right hand, the oil, blood, cartilage, ear, no. What are we doing here? What does this mean? So of course, first of all, it's important to remember we don't really know. I mean, I shouldn't say we don't know. There's a lot of different opinions. All of them are correct. There's a lot of bad opinions that are incorrect. But of our chachamim, of our chazal, of our great meforshim and commentators, all of those answers are correct. And there's a lot of symbolism to all of this. And one of the great commentaries, the medieval commentators that we have on the Torah is Rabbi Yitzchak Arama. He wrote a book called Akedat Yitzchak, and I have here a sort of a smidgen of his commentaries. As you can see, I cut out a smidgen of a smidgen. It's a very long work, but let's see if we can explain at least some of it. So first of all, manim lomar ki kulam nasus malim al derech shenamar hachacham. Kohelet Yud lev ksil lismalo kamo shiva bishar. So Zion Perik Dalid. So he quotes here the book of Kohelet. That's Ecclesiastes, and he says that what are we doing here with the right hand, with the left hand? So we say that the seat of wisdom of a man's intellect is on his right side. This doesn't, just so you know, this is not a I'm left-handed myself. This is not discrimination against left-handed people or anything like that. This is not even necessarily scientifically accurate. We know that the right-handed person's the two hemispheres of the brain. The person who's right-handed is more focused on the left side of the brain. Whatever. This is not for now. The brain is a very complicated. Actually, still not completely. I should say not completely understood part of the human body. It's still being studied incessantly. Amnam haya kohen achar kach mizeh meHashem asher al kapo with smilit sheva pamim l'fnei Hashem. So why is he sprinkled 7 times to Hashem? Umate Hashem ben mizeh al elu ha'evarim ha'iminim atzmam al dam ha'ashem lomar shrufuat hadam hazeh v'aseret katamav haya mekabel alav or haTorah v'lahit mitzvotaha shekavantam lehafuch kol ha'poalim asmalim al hayamim. So he's saying here that, sorry, here he says, "Leiv hacham lemino." All right. So the heart of a wise person is on his right side. So the point here is that we're focusing on the right hand to remind us that the Metzora was not acting like a smart person. The person, this person who had tzaraat, who was a tzarua, got tzaraat by acting foolishly, whether it's because he spoke lashon hara, or he or she, like we said before, was not generous, or was selfish, or looked was looking at others, or looking at things he shouldn't have looked at. Whatever it is, he was acting foolishly. Now that's a very important concept. Now, when we think of the right side, we need to think of chachma. We look at our right hand, we look at our right foot, we need to think this is symbolic of wisdom. It doesn't mean my left side is a nothing, but that's what the right symbolizes. It represents chesed, kindness, but it also represents wisdom. And the person who sins, we have to remember this. This is crucial, especially when we judge. Hopefully we don't judge others, but when we judge ourselves, and we're very harsh about how we judge ourselves, it's important to remember the Rambam, who says that when a person sins, it's usually because a ruach shtut, a spirit of silliness, let's call it what it is, a spirit of stupidity hit us. Right? We got hit by the stupid stick, right? And we did the wrong thing, not because we want to, not because we want to be away from Hashem, not because we want to be separate, but the other way around. We naturally want to cling closer and closer to Hashem. So why are we getting further away? Why are we making this silly mistake? Why did we steal what we weren't supposed to take? Why did we eat without making a blessing? Why did we do what we did? Simple answer. We got stupid for a second, right? This is those of you who are watching this live, you'll know. It was this is an appropriate day to talk about people becoming stupid on purpose. But the fact is that we need to focus on our intellect. That's the only thing that will keep us on the straight and narrow, is that using our minds and being realistic and using resolve. If we're confused, if our minds are gone, then we are victims of any kind of whim, and all the winds of history and philosophy will blow us off out of our roots. So we need to stay strong on the right side. That's why the Metzora gets sprinkled or gets dipped in wine on the ear, on the finger, and on the thumb, and on the toe. And why those particular body parts? Because those body parts, in a sense, are sort of like the supreme parts of those things. In other words, the ear, in a sense, is one of our most important organs, because it allows us to learn Torah, allows us to get things into our heads. Right? We hear things and we learn like that. Ask anybody who's struggling to learn how to pray properly, and what they'll say is, I didn't come often enough. I didn't hear. I don't remember the tune. I don't. These kinds of answers is what you'll get. The hand is the symbol of action, and the main finger on the hand is the thumb. The opposable thumb is what separates us from apes. Yeah, and of course the big toe symbolizes like the top of the foot, and the foot represents our also our action, our ability to move and walk around, run around, and do the great things that we do. Okay. Okay, and he says more there, and there's in the source sheet you'll have translation from Eliyahu Monk for some of the things we said today. All right, let's keep going. Let's get to the tzaraat of the house. All right, the person comes home, turns on the light, lights up a candle or whatever, gets into his house, and what does he find? He finds something that looks like it's tzaraat. These are, this could look like green or red spots on a white wall, right? You washed it off, and it comes back, etc. What is he supposed to do? Uva asher lo habayit higid lekohen lemor kinega nira li babayit. He's supposed to go find out, seek out a kohen, and he's supposed to say to him, Hinega, like a nega. Nega means a discoloration, but ki means like a discoloration that I see on my house. Why is he speaking like that? Nearly, it seems to it appeared to me, right? Like a discoloration appeared to me. This is all very, by the way, very what's called in English passive voice, right? And it's also very non-committal. You didn't say he saw anything. It appeared to me, right? When the government does something and they don't want to be blamed for something they did, they don't say the government has raised your taxes. They'll say in a passive voice, the government your taxes were raised. And then you're like, who did that? Some magical tax elf or whatever, right? So, and I promised myself I wouldn't talk about taxes. Anyway, whatever the case may be, by the way, it should be noted in case you're watching this at some other time. It should be noted that Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and Rav Moshe Feinstein made it very clear. Not only is it important to pay your taxes, but Rav Yaakov, I believe, is quoted as saying that it should be seen as a privilege. We should be so happy out of our own happiness that we live in such a wonderful country. We should volunteer to pay taxes. This is how you support the government and make sure it is strong and able to do the programs that we all benefit from, which we all benefit. All right, not entirely relevant to the class, but just so you know. All right, so why all this passive language? So it says the Malbim, Kenega nira li, like a discoloration appeared to me. Lo yachlit hadavar shehu nega. He doesn't say for sure that this thing is a discoloration. Kimora lifnei hakohen rak amar derek safek. He's speaking as if in doubt. Kinega maybe. So he's not poskening. He's not saying that it's a nega. V'chein hanegaim. So he quotes the Rambam, and that's why it's also in passive language. It appeared to me instead of I saw. Because what he's trying to do, he's trying to make it clear that he's not clear. Right? He's making it clear that he's not clear. He doesn't know that this is tzaraat. It's the Kohen's job to say that it's tzaraat. It's not your job to judge the situation and say, I saw tzaraat in my house. No, this is I think this might be this thing you guys talk about called tzaraat. Even if you're an expert, even if you know that for sure this is it, and you even know why you got it and everything else, and you're already ready to do teshuva, you don't come up to the Kohen and say, I saw tzaraat in my house. You go up to the Kohen and say, something that kind of looks like it might be tzaraat, it might be in my house. So all of this is in doubt, by the way, because when the Kohen comes into your house, Kohen has to be able to come into the house to check it. And if he says that it's tzaraat, the house, as soon as he leaves the house, he's supposed to leave the house and tell you if it's tzaraat. He says, let's say he says it is tzaraat. At that point, everything in the house becomes impure. If you're telling the Kohen that it's impure to begin with, the Kohen can't even come in. There's nowhere to go. The whole house is already impure. The Kohen can't come in to an impure house. So that's and it only becomes impure as soon as he leaves. So that's all part of this same system here that allows us to have this kind of doubt. All right, last piece for today. Also, very, very important fundamental idea. We mentioned in the introduction that the Torah talks about a group of people who become, individuals who become impure through this impurity called ziva. A man can become a zav, a woman can become a zava when they've noticed a certain discharge coming from their privates, usually called gonorrhea in English. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about that for now. Once they notice this, or once it's established that that's what's going on with them, then they become impure with this kind of impurity called ziva, as I've said before. And this impurity can be transferred to other things. So, for example, the Torah tells us, chapter 15, verses 5 and 6, V'ish, they're talking about a zav, somebody who has ziva, asher yiga b'mishkavo yichabes begadav v'rachas b'mayim v'tamei ad ha'ar. So if this person touched his bed, now the bed is now impure, what is he supposed to do? He's supposed to now launder whatever he touched, including his clothes. He's supposed to bathe himself in water, and he remains impure until the evening. He's tamei ad ha'arav. He's until the evening, and then after that impurity, then he can go back into doing pure things like going into the Beit HaMikdash, which is one of the things that you can't do when you're impure with this. Then the Torah continues, V'hayoshev al hakli, or somebody who sits on a kli, in other words, sits on a chair, asher yishev alav, that's used for sitting, a bench, a chair, a stool. Hazav yichabes begadav, the zav, again, in this case, has to again wash his clothing, v'rachas b'mayim, he has to bathe himself in water, and again, tamei ad ha'arav. So, interesting point, if you look carefully at the different ways that these verses describe it. The first thing is talking about bedding. It's talking about a zav touching it. Then it talks about a chair, and it doesn't talk about touching. Now it's talking about sitting. Does that mean that if you sit on a bed but you don't touch it, that's okay? Or if you touch a chair but don't sit on it, it's okay? No. The halacha is, either way, if you sit on it or if you touch it, bed or chair, either way, they're tamei, and then you need to launder whatever you can launder. So why is the language discussing the chair and the bed so different? Answers Rav Zalman Sorotskin in his Naim LaTorah. Derech ha'adam lahatzia et hamita. People make their beds. That's a thing people do. Some of my kids need to hear this, right? Derech adam lahatzia et hamita. Asher hu rotza lishkov Allah. If he wants to sit on it or something, he's not just going to sit on it with its sheets all asunder. Right, helter skelter. He's going to sit down. He's going to flatten out, straighten out the bed. And so that's why it says regarding touching the bed that he's touching it. Mishinaga nitma. And when he touches it, he becomes tame. It becomes tame. So he's already been tame. Aval b'moshav, when it comes to other things, ein derech la'asot hakanot liyeshiva eino tame arasher yeshev. But when it comes to chairs, we don't make our chair. We don't fluff the chair before we sit on it. We don't touch it. You can just find a chair, flop your stuff down, and sit down on it. And that's why the Torah talks like that. Lefichach ne'amar v'hayeshev ala kli aval din echad mishkav v'moshav. So like I said, the rule is the same. Whether you touched it or you moved it or you fluffed it or whatever, a chair and a bed become tameh from a zav touching it or sitting on it. Either way, same rule. The different language is used specifically because these things are used differently. And the Torah wants that to speak to people in a language that they'll understand about situations that they're used to. You don't talk to people about sitting on a bed because nobody sits on a bed without touching it first. So you talk about touching the bed. Nobody sits on a chair by fluffing it first. Most people, I mean, I'm assuming. And the Torah similarly assumes. And so therefore, it doesn't talk about making the chair before you sit on it. Just sitting down in the chair is enough. And again, the same law applies. If you are, God forbid, a zav or a zava, and you're touching a chair or you're touching a bed, you're fluffing a bed or you're fluffing a chair, you're sitting on a bed, you're sitting on a chair, it doesn't matter. In all of those situations, it's the same law, and that is that they all become impure, and then need this purity. How do you do the purity? Again, with the bathing, the laundering, etc., etc. It's worth mentioning that nowadays we're not so concerned with these things. Obviously, if somebody feels that they have this particular illness, they should probably see a doctor first of all. Any kind of discharge from that area should probably be inspected by a professional. But the impurity and such, of course, can be easily taken care of nowadays by going to a mikvah. And God willing, soon when the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, Mashiach comes, then we'll have to worry more deeply about how pure or impure we are before we go to the Mikdash. At this point, I'll stop the share to Facebook. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them live or share them on the YouTube channel. Thank you, and take care.